everyone. My name is Linda Jacobsen, and I'm really happy to be here sharing with you tonight. It's night where I am, so it's a little bit dark, just so you know. But here I am. I'm a counselor and a coach, and I work with astrology. Astrology is a passion of mine, and it's been so since I was 16, and I'm 39 now. So I will get into my own story a little bit more further down the road, but the topic of this talk is Pluto in Libra and Scorpio generations, the shadow of codependency, and tools to heal it. So, yeah, of course, this is a generalized description, as I think anyone who's gotten into contact with evolutionary astrology at least have heard the saying, one size does not fit all. So of course, I'm not claiming here that everybody who has Pluto in Libra or Scorpio have issues with codependency, but yet I've seen this in my own work to be one of the shadow sides that can come forth, and I'm very fascinated by it. So therefore the topic of tonight. So just to move forward here with what codependency is. So we'll just start there with a kind of definition, if you may. And there is really no like, this is what it is, one phrase, everybody agrees. So this is the definitions that I've picked together that I feel are valid. So I just want to say that. But basically, codependency, what is it? So it's sourcing your sense of value and worth from outside of yourself. And I would say that that first phrase, everybody would agree upon when it comes to codependency and codependent tendencies. So a chronic neglect of self in order to gain love, validation, and even self-identity through another person. And always trying to meet others' expectations. Another thing that's very common is having a difficult time setting and enforcing boundaries towards others. And having a difficult time understanding what your own needs are or how to meet them. Of course, if you don't know what your needs are, how are you going to know how to meet them, right? So having said this, of course, this is a sliding scale. It's not like you're either 100% codependent or you're not, right? You can be on a spectrum of this. And this is something that starts in childhood. It starts in childhood by not receiving emotional attunement from parents or caretakers and having to adapt yourself to the outer reality and the needs of your caretakers in order to receive love and create a sense of safety and a sense of survival. So this is not to blame or shame anybody's parents, and I have 2 children myself, but being a parent, it's not an easy job. And I would just like to say here as well, I think society as it has been for a very long time is not really set up for successful parenting. I don't know if it was ever the plan that, you know, 1 or 2 person were supposed to be basically 100% responsible for 1, 2, 3 or a certain amount of children. So definitely it's not to blame or shame anybody's parents. We can just assume that everybody does the best they can. Of course, we know that's not always the case, but, you know, generally speaking, it is to create awareness about how these patterns can be formed so that we can move beyond them, right? Yeah, one thing as well is very common here that we don't receive it, or we only receive attention, better put, when we please our caretakers. And this is, of course, you know, nobody taught our parents how to do it otherwise. So how could you expect maybe for them to know? It's very common, right, that you get attention when you're a good girl or a good boy, or you do something that's pleasing to the outer world. You're like, oh, you get pat on the back, or your teachers acknowledges you or such. This is very common, and of course it can enforce this kind of behavior pattern where we feel like we need to please others to receive attention. Also, what I want to say here, why it's can run so deep, is because as a child we need to feel loved. We will basically do, and we've heard this, you know, children would do anything to feel loved or to receive love, right? Because we know we're biological creatures as well, so we know that we need our caretakers to love us, to assure that they will take care of us, because we know we can't clothe ourselves, we can't feed ourselves, we can't take care of ourselves for a very long time, right? And children are born, they're naturally codependent, right? They need their parents to care for them. So we are kind of set up to really do a lot to be able to assure that we will get love and attention, because that's what we feel will make us survive. So yeah, so that's why it can run very deep. And when you have these kind of conditioning when you're older, when you get triggered, when you feel like you might not please someone, it can actually feel like you're gonna die, which of course your conscious mind is like, that's not true, I'm not gonna, it doesn't matter if, you know, Susie at work doesn't like me. But the emotional reality of that little child inside of you that might still live in there, you know, it's like, I can't not please her because then I might, you know, die. So this can run very deep. We also learn codependency through family dynamics where there is enmeshment. So meaning there's no clear boundaries between family members, and the feeling of one person severely affects the feel of every other family member. And as it says further down here on the slide, we do not have to grow up with alcoholic or abusive parents in order to develop codependent patterns. But I would say this is maybe the typical scenario that you think about if you have a mom or a dad that's an alcoholic, or, you know, when mom is drunk, everybody tiptoes around her, or when dad is in that mood, you know, everybody tiptoes around him, because we know if we say the wrong thing now, things can get really nasty, you know? So it's like one feeling or one emotional state of one family member affects everybody. There is no clear boundaries. And I think before, codependency was maybe first founded as a thing created in children to alcoholic or addictive, or parents with addiction behaviors or problems. You can also say codependency is a constant fear of how people will respond to you, and therefore always catering to others, to other people's needs before your own, in order to create a safe reality. So it's again this kind of thing that if I don't please others, I don't feel safe, because that's how it was in my childhood. I felt that I needed to please my parents. I was not properly emotionally attuned to. They didn't attune to me, I had to attune to them. And it goes on in adult life as catering to others so that I can feel safe. Yeah. So connecting this to the astrology, Pluto in Libra, or the 7th house, or Pluto in Scorpio, or the 8th house, I've seen that people with these placements usually, or more often, can have issues with codependency. And as I said, no one size fits all, right? So we can't say it's always so. It's a generalization. Of course, also if you have a strong Libra or Scorpio influence from some other place in your chart, right, by other planets. So this, what's written here, I didn't put it in writing, so I just want to say it is mainly taken from the first Pluto book by Jeffrey Wolf Green. So it's not my own words, all of it, right? So what does it mean? Pluto in Libra in the 7th house. There is a tendency to have unconscious emotional security attachments to being in a relationship or to relate with others in order to feel complete. So of course this sets up this like focus on the other person. on a deep level. And that kind of sets the stage for codependency. Yeah? A need to be needed, the same, and a need to be liked by others, which is also, of course, if we come in with these kind of frequencies, we would have an innate kind of probability or possibility to kind of fall into these type of patterns of focusing on others easily, forgetting about ourselves maybe. So another thing with Pluto and Libra, or the 7th house, is a need to give and solicit advice, getting involved in others' business, or allowing others to guide one's own choice making. So it's this kind of overly involvement with another. There can also be, as I said, strong focus on the other and a possibility to lose oneself in the other. And just having kind of talked about what codependency is, in a generalized sense at least, we can see that this would, kind of fit into that. So if there is a strong Libra influence in the chart, this can be setting the stage for codependent behaviors, right? So the next one is Pluto in Scorpio, or the 8th house. And this one might not be as apparent because Scorpio energy is a little bit more fierce. I mean, we all know that Libras like to be liked, right? And to be presentable and, create harmony, and maybe, selling out a little bit on themselves or ourselves. I have Pluto and Libra myself, in order to, please others and create this kind of, superficial harmony, but still, don't want to upset anyone. Well, Scorpio is a little more intense, but I say when we move from Libra to Scorpio, from the 7th to the 8th house, the plot of codependency thickens. It gets deeper in Scorpio. Everything gets deeper there, right? So what's said here, and this is also a lot of it taken from the first Pluto book by Jeffrey Wolfson. So Pluto in Scorpio, the 8th house, karmic history of overly investing oneself and having created dependencies upon a person or a situation, handling power to something outside the self. So this, of course, is also this, as I said, it gets deeper in Scorpio, and that's what I've seen when this Scorpio archetype is involved and this pattern of codependency exists with someone. It usually goes deeper. There's a strong attraction towards wanting to merge with another. So the merging in Scorpio is like 1 + 1 = 1, right? So when we have gotten involved with someone or something, and may have this also unconscious emotional security attachment to the power that lies without or outside ourselves, as we might perceive it, at least, right? Through that person or that relationship or that something, and it can be very difficult to let it go. And Scorpio is fixed water, and still waters run deep, they say, and letting go is not always the strongest, capacity or the easiest thing if you have a lot of Scorpio. So once you've merged with another, it's hard to reverse that process of osmosis. So if you're in a very codependent situation and you have strong Scorpio, it can be even harder to reverse that. There's a dislike of superficial relationship. So as I've said, can lead to even deeper codependency. And also this black and white perspective within the Scorpio archetype, or if you have Pluto there specifically, right, or particularly. So black and white perspective until necessary transformation happens. So things can go pretty intense. As I've noticed in my own life, I will give a little example from my own chart later on. This is also, of course, not always bad or so. When things get really intense, they get intense enough for the necessary transformation to happen. So everything is there for a reason, right? So I don't want to sound too negative. It's just things can become pretty intense, also because that I do not want to let go until it's absolutely necessary. But transformation in the end, sooner or later at least, always happens, right? So as well here, a need to simplify life and isolate from external environment to identify one's own essence versus what are pieces of other people that they have been karmically linked to through relationships. So there is a lot of relating that has infused the soul's experience with these archetypes. So of course, that codependency again, if I have something invested, a lot invested outside of myself. So moving on. Excuse me. Going back to the codependency topic again, what are signs of this? Well, some of the signs that I've stated here are constantly looking for validation from others. So there can be difficulties validating an emotion or an experience if nobody feels the same. And this might be typical, or especially for Libra, I would say. Also a hard time making decisions on my own, asking others for opinions. Making decisions is also something that is difficult. I've read and studied a little bit for the human psyche, or for us as humans in this human experience, because we know that decisions is the most powerful tool that we have. That basically our whole lives are shaped by the decisions that we make or don't make. So we know innately somehow that there is a lot of responsibility behind the decisions that we're making or not making, and that they will alter or not alter the course of our life. And therefore, there can be this pressure behind and difficulties for everybody behind making decisions. But especially if you're codependent, you can't really find yourself and your own center, because you've been conditioned from an early age to focus so much on the external reality in order for you to feel safe. It's hard to know what you actually want and need. So there's this asking for others' opinions all the time, which can get very confusing and leave you kind of like a leaf in the wind. So other signs here as people pleasing would be a difficult thing to say if you're very codependent, you're a people pleaser. A hard time to say no. And usually feeling drained or even exhausted. I've noticed that people have this conditioning. Me personally, like I started with myself. That's why I want to talk a little bit about my own chart. Not because I want to talk about myself, but because it's such a good example for this topic. Because I have a stellium in Libra in the 8th house, so I know how this goes. So when you're pleasing others and you're constantly focusing on things outside of yourself, you have a hard time saying no. Usually you don't even notice, right? You're just kind of I'm just being a good person because I'm a good girl and I want to be a good person, but really you're just kind of playing an old pattern of trying to keep yourself safe by pleasing everybody else. It's exhausting. It's very draining. So, and as I say, this is a sliding scale, and it's not like everybody who has or in the 7th or 8th house or a strong Libra or Scorpio influence is codependent by nature. But I'd say it's pretty common and in society at large because of how we are conditioned as well from societal structures, at least in the Western world that I know about, even if I live abroad. So a lot of people today feel exhausted and drained, and I'd say a big part of that, of course, overworking and too much screen time, stress, and all of that are of course factors, but not really knowing how to anchor in with yourself, that's tiring. So another sign here is the fixer and the helper, always saying yes when someone needs something, taking on other people's problems as if they are your own. It's a typical one, right? And this can also be, as we probably, heard before, a way to not dealing with your own issues, being very occupied by everybody else. And as it is so in codependency that you will be deeply affected by how other people feel, there can be this kind of unconscious idea that I have to fix everybody else, and when everybody else is okay, then I will be okay. So it's actually quite self-centered, and as it goes into the next point here, need to control others' behaviors and reactions so that you can feel safe. So all of this giving isn't necessarily always just from the purest heart and most open place of just giving for joy. It can be very controlling, and that's a sneaky one because it doesn't come off like that to oneself or to others. But it is that thing that I need everybody else to be okay so that I can finally relax, because if people are not okay, I can't feel okay because I'm so deeply, affected by everybody around me. And that's also tiring, of course, and we all know that, we can hardly control ourselves. Trying to control other people is that's a lost battle. So if you are caught in the fixer and the helper and always saying yes when someone needs something and taking on other people's problems as if they are your own, that's a little red flag to look at. Next one here, fear of abandonment showing up as the need to save others, right? So I feel like I can't stand feeling others' pain or discomfort. This is kind of more about what I just talked about, that we want others to be okay so we can be okay. And when we feel like we can't stand seeing others being in pain or discomfort, what I think is that it's often our own inner child that gets triggered and remembers this kind of abandonment and pain in ourselves of not having been seen and validated like we needed on an emotional level as children, getting triggered. So we project that pain of abandonment onto others. So when they are in pain of discomfort, it's actually our own inner child. Oh, you're feeling really triggered. So we try to save them. And we have to save them because, of course, if someone is suffering that much, we need to, who wouldn't do that? Who wouldn't want to help? And I'm not saying that we should not help other people, of course. We just want to be balanced, right? So that we have the option to say yes or no in accordance to what we can actually honestly give and not give. So trying to save others instead of turning inwards and actually saving ourselves, right? Another sign of codependency, and I just want to repeat this again when I say codependency, this is a sliding scale. Again, it's not like you're codependent or you're not. This is something that can live in you, and maybe it can even in your life be more prominent in certain stages of your life and not so much in others. So another thing here, though, is vague sense of self, or vague sense of self, and vague sense of what I want for myself and what my needs are. I'm okay, whatever you want. I don't know, kind of just, drifting by. And this is also so when we are not properly attuned to as children, we can't really go deeper with ourselves because we're kind of stuck in survival mode. It's not necessarily so that we're like, oh my God, I'm just trying to survive all the time. It sounds pretty drastic. It doesn't have to be that intense or traumatic, but there is still so that not getting the space to be validated exactly as you are. And that's what I kind of mean when I said the whole conditioning of society isn't really allowing children to feel what they're feeling and be who they are. It's a lot of good girls, I don't know, are kind, and big boys don't cry, and don't cry, and don't feel that, don't do that, don't and I would say a lot of our own parents carry emotional baggage and unhealed wounds, so that when their children get emotional, it's like, don't be like that, because they can't understand it. And that happens on an unconscious level. It's not like the parent is necessarily like, oh my God, I don't want to, let my child feel. It's a conscious thought. It just happens, and patterns that gets perpetuated, down through generations. And so when we don't get that kind of attunement in childhood, we don't really get the space to go deeper with ourselves, to really be, I like this and I need that, and yeah, that works for me. And we're kind of left at a more superficial level. So that later on in life can play out like that as well, of vague sense of what I want for myself, because I haven't really ever done that journey with myself and what my own needs actually are. And also it can be very hard, I've noticed this with clients, it can be very hard, and with myself in my life, it can be very hard to feel your own intuitive guidance that we all have. I, am a firm believer that we all have intuition, of this kind of extrasensory perception that is a great tool for helping us to, guide our way forth in life and knowing what is right for us or not, no matter what appears to be the correct thing to do. So it can be very hard to feel one's own intuitive guidance because of constant outward focus. So this subtle voice, feel, sensation of intuition is hard to pick up on if we're constantly, sometimes, unconsciously focusing outward all the time. So one thing of the work that I do with my clients, that is one of the things that is recuperated, that is one of my greatest kind of joys to be able to be a facilitator for others, is in recuperating a stronger sense of inner guidance. Yeah. Also, I just want to mention, I thought this was really interesting, in that this is how I came up with this topic, in a sense, because the moon's nodes have been in Cancer Capricorn, in the Cancer Capricorn axis, from November 2018 until May 2020. It's just going to change, right? It's on the 5th, I think, right? My head these days, it's just the dates and such are not my strongest side anymore, but it used to be a very sharp mind. But I know in my progressed chart, Mercury just went into Pisces, and I'm like lost when it comes to this. But I think it's the 5th of May. Doesn't matter, in May anyways. They're just going to change. But they've been a year and a half in the Cancer Capricorn axis. So I personally, this is just personal observation, right? Observed an increase in the field of self-development around the topic of codependency since the nodes moved into this axis. And the North node, that has been in Cancer, still is, will soon move, but have been in Cancer for a year and a half, ushers the collective evolution to take place by connecting with the emotional body, or the emotional nature, right? Cancer. And everything's stored there. So my observation is that the Libra and Scorpio generations, considering the age group, right, are a big chunk of the age group interested in self-development matters. So codependency has come to the forefront, as it would have been an emotional pattern stored in many. This is just my observation that I thought were interesting, as I've seen an increase in this, and also with people I work with. Anyways, my own story, here I am. So just briefly, I'm a licensed social worker and counselor, and I use astrology and many self-development tools in my coaching work. That's mainly where I do coaching, and private sessions as well, just one-on-ones. I empower women, mainly. I work with men as well, but when I do larger coaching kind of containers, I work with women to find their purpose. Really makes them feel alive, and that they have a purpose in life, to move beyond patterns of codependency, holding them back, and become truly empowered. I am Swedish, but I live in Tulum, Mexico since 7 years back. And I have an interest, as I mentioned, in astrology since I was 16. And here what is interesting. So due to my own conditioning of codependency, and this is why it's also a dear topic to me, I did not do individual sessions or even thought that I could become an astrologer until way later in life. Not because, and this wasn't clear to me, because these things, everything is operating in the unconscious. Until we make the unconscious conscious, we can't really make a change, right? So I couldn't do one-on-one work for a very long time because it didn't feel safe to me, because I had such a lot of my own worth and value placed in other people's perception of me, that if I would sit one-on-one with a client in any way, shape, or form, at least paid, because I did this all the time for all my friends for free. That's another thing. But as a paid profession, or saying this is what I do in a sense, I couldn't hold that for myself emotionally. It felt too scary, too unsafe. So also, if I would go back, which you can't and I don't really want to, but I would have become a psychologist and not a social worker. But as a social worker, you work in groups. What happened in my actual professional life is that I did a lot of one-on-one therapeutical work anyways. But as a social worker, it wasn't really my responsibility in that sense. Well, if I would have been a clinical psychologist or something working with one-on-one clients, I would have had to have that responsibility. And I couldn't really handle that emotionally because of how much of my worth was invested in how people that they would like me. I didn't understand this at the time, and that's how it is, right? Until we see something clearly we don't see. So I was just, I want to become a social worker. And I didn't choose to not work with astrology sooner because I didn't think it was, I thought it was too woo-woo, or my family would never approve of it or anything like that, because I was always traveling and doing a lot of kind of unconventional things. It was clearly my own emotional capacity to hold myself in the responsibility that I feel if I have another person in front of me. So that's just how it can play out. And of course, that holds you back from making life choices that are more aligned for you. So my passion is to support others to step into purposeful life and claim their right to empowerment and prosperity. Prosperity, I don't just mean, economical, but also prosperity in really receiving that which is life's bounties, love, intimacy, attention, money as well. But it's way beyond that. So I have a stellium in Libra in the 8th house. So this whole topic is very close to me, especially through my moon Pluto. Balsamic conjunction, where I have been forced in my life to culminate. This balsamic conjunction is a lot about culmination of the whole cycle that came prior. So culminate emotional dependencies on others in quite dramatic and forceful ways, actually. It did take me some time to understand my own conditioning, as in a good Scorpio manner, I did not want to let go. So I was studying evolutionary astrology when I finally came across evolutionary astrology somewhat years ago. It has helped me tremendously, and I'm ever so grateful for this work. Of course, for Jeffrey Wolf Green, but everybody who comes after, and for this whole community and this Zoom meetings, for example, that we are on now, and all the resources that are so readily available. So I'm very grateful, because it was evolutionary astrology, because I'd been interested in astrology for my whole life, but it wasn't until I came across this that I really could decipher this patterns within myself and muster up the courage to leave people and situations behind and transmute my own barriers of safety. So I just want to show my own chart here. And as I said, not to talk about myself necessarily. I don't know if you can see, I don't know if I can move the cursor here, but you see I have a huge stellium there, planets, and Mr. Pluto himself, and that balsamic conjunction with the moon in Libra. Also, Black Moon Lilith, this is true Black Moon Lilith, it's not the asteroid, and then Juno, and all in the 8th house. So a lot of relational matters and dependencies formed upon others. So I don't think it's a coincidence that this whole topic has become a big part of what I work with. So moving beyond this, okay, what do we do? So if this is something that you feel is alive in you, as I said, it's a sliding scale. It's not like you're 100% in it or 100% out. I'd say if you feel like it's something being codependent, people-pleasing, sourcing your sense of value outside of yourself, being afraid of, claiming your own right to making your own choices in fear of upsetting others, well, then there is an issue that you would benefit from balancing out within yourself. I also like in evolutionary astrology kind of this view of not like, oh, that's not good and you're gonna become better. It's like you're here and you want to incorporate the opposite polarity so that you can come into balance. So anyways, if there is codependent patterns, there is a need to redirect one's focus inwardly again and to reparent those parts of us who feel we are in danger if we do not please others. As I said, this kicks in with strong survival issues. Actually, if we feel like others are going to get upset with us and they won't like us, it can go deep and we feel like we won't survive, which of course our conscious mind says that's BS. Of course, I don't care about what they think, but emotionally we are totally held back because we feel like we can't survive if we upset others. So reparenting is basically creating a relationship with your own inner child and behaving like the parent that you wish you would have had now that you're an adult and can look at this with your consciousness, more aware. So the parent you wish you would have had to those parts of yourself. This means, first and foremost, I would say, learning to validate your own emotions and reality. Validate your own emotional reality. It means to stop the cycle of self-abandonment by learning how to check in with oneself first, before meeting others' needs and requests. So, first and foremost, learning to validate one's own emotional reality. And I'm a firm believer of the fact, I would dare to say, that we cannot just love and light our way and spiritually bypass our way out of something and create sustainable change that way. It doesn't work. So we need to be able to validate the emotional reality that we are in, because that's what we're feeling. That's what's happening. If we pretend that there is something else, there is still this self-abandonment happening. And when we do that, we have the opportunity to actually transmute it. But we can't, first of all, we can't let go of something that we won't acknowledge is happening. And we can't change something before we accept it, right? So validate our own emotions. This is what I'm feeling, whether I like it or not, right? So pause and reflect. So learning to just pause. Of course, when we create awareness around something is the first step towards change, to even become aware, right? So just starting to pause and not just say yes or just not give yourself away, to learn how to check in with yourself first before meeting other people's needs. And this will activate this Libra lessons around giving that I find brilliant. And this has been such a huge part of my own journey as well. And I suppose this comes from the beginning from Jeffrey Wolf Green and has been mentioned in many talks and books and such that I read and studied myself. The Libra lessons around giving I put here. When to give, to whom to give, how much to give, and of course, is it okay to not give at all? Like, oh, that is highly uncomfortable for anyone, let's say, with a strong Libra influence. And very necessary as well to work through if we want to create freedom and balance within ourselves. So really reflecting upon these questions. Whom to give, when to give, how much to give, and is it okay for me to actually say, no, I can't give it all? Or to certain people, it's not reciprocal, I can't. Or can I? Or but really come up with your own truth around this, authentically. And as I said, first of all, we create consciousness, but then we have to actually do it, right? Because evolution happens through the emotional body, and we can't just sit and think about these things. We actually have to make changes, and we will feel things. So when we start to say no, or I can give you this, but I can't give you that, or that doesn't work for me, and putting down new boundaries, we will feel a lot of things, and it's going to be highly uncomfortable. So since change and growth happens outside the comfort zone, we will have to learn how to sit with uncomfortable emotions. And here is this reparenting of the inner child. It's okay. I'm here for myself. I'm feeling what I'm feeling. Might not like it, but this is me. Okay. And learn how to sit with the uncomfortable emotions and not just run outside of ourselves again and try to fix everybody else. So a good reminder for me is the thought that we can have the discomfort of things, just staying the same, because staying in this patterns of being a people pleaser basically is highly uncomfortable. It's draining. It is often not having a clear guidance in your life, often feeling like you don't really have passion and energy, or like, yes, energy, you know, like this is what I'm about, and you know, that kind of motivation that has you, you know, go up. Maybe not every day, but at least, you know, generally speaking, a bed in the morning and feel like you're here for a reason. And like that's, if we don't have that in life, life is pretty damn hard a lot of the times. You know, if we don't have that, it's just not, that's discomfort, I'd say. You know, so we either have the discomfort of things just staying the same, or the discomfort of growth. You choose. And when you put it like that, and if you're actually at the point in your own evolutionary cycle and journey, we don't want to push people, right, or ourselves either. That doesn't really work. But then becomes kind of a no-brainer. I want the discomfort of things staying the same, or the discomfort growth. There's going to be discomfort anyway, so I might as well choose the growth path. And there is where, for me as well, evolutionary astrology has been so valuable, because we know if we don't evolve, evolution is a natural law, we will, whether we want to or not. And instead of just sitting and waiting for some cataclysmic, you know, event to come, pulling the rug under our feet, we can actually chip away at it ourselves and align ourselves with our own evolutionary needs. So we'd have to learn to set boundaries with ourselves and others. Practice to say no. As I said, pause and reflect before you decide. When you start setting boundaries, things will get messy. So be prepared for that, because it will be highly uncomfortable. People will react to you differently if you haven't enforced any boundaries before in relationship, and you will feel like, I don't know, and you will feel, you know, oh my God, I'm letting everybody down, or am I a bad person, or whatever. It's pretty messy. So I just want to say that, because it's so worth it, right? So just be prepared. To know how to set a boundary and to enforce it, we also have to know our values. So Venus ruling Libra, also ruling Taurus, inner side of Libra. What are your values in life? So you really have to get in contact with yourself to know what you value, what you think is worthy. And from there, know, okay, well, that works for me or not. And to be able to hold that and to sit with the uncomfortable emotions that will come up when other people have objections to your boundaries. So practice also keeping your word with yourself. This is very important. This is important to create accountability and safety from the inside out as part of the kind of reparenting process. So even if it's just in small things, when you say you're going to do something, do it, to create a sense of accountability, and that starts to make you feel safer, I'd say, from the inside and out. And showing up for oneself in this way establishes trust and safety within, which is crucial for being able to face the fear of abandonment that can arise when saying no to requests or stating your needs in relationships. So yeah, it's kind of more of the same, right? But this is where we have to go. And start to acknowledge and follow your own intuitive guidance, which can really be a fun way. Challenge, or even doesn't even have to be a challenge, but a fun kind of journey to be on. So tools and techniques, more of this, how to get here. Crucial, spend some time alone, meditate. There's many ways to meditate, but basically sit down, shut out outer stimulation, and connect with yourself. I've done Vipassana meditations, and so, which is, you know, silence and no contact, and it's kind of the boot camp of meditation. I don't find it necessary personally. I mean, if you're interested in that, it's wonderful, and I don't think maybe I ever felt so good after I was in a 10-day Vipassana meditation. retreat or whatever you call it. But even sitting down with a guided meditation, don't feel like that is fake, you know, or putting on some music that can help, you know, with headphones, your mind to kind of wander away, but maybe not just being caught up in thoughts. Even for 10 or 15 minutes every day or several times a week can create huge changes in really connecting with yourself. Journal. So get to know yourself, invest time in this. You are the center of your own universe, right? So need to know who you are, befriend yourself. Start a hobby just for you. Find out by trial and error the things that you actually like, to really kind of get into yourself again. And this is what I like, not just what is productive, you know, or this is good in my profession or something. What do I like to do just because I like it? Just when we were children, we just did things because we liked it. So set boundaries with yourself and others, of course, with ourselves as well. So again, when we start setting boundaries, things will get messy. So I highly suggest working with a therapist, a coach, an astrologer, or someone, accountability buddy or something, if you don't want to invest in professional help, to accompany you on this process. Also, what was damaged in relationship can be healed in relationship. So it is of a high value to have someone that you can work with that can mirror back to you and reflect back to you a reality where you can state your needs and your emotions, and there won't be a triggered reaction from that. That can be a good place to start to really move beyond or heal these patterns within ourselves. So learn how to self-soothe when we feel anxious, to really be able to soothe ourselves. And to learn that, is good to prioritize self-care. Consistently invest your time and money into things that fill you up and make you feel good. And this is, of course, different for everyone, what that is, right? So practice the understanding that if you are drained, you literally cannot give anyone else anything of real quality, right? So it is a service to all to keep yourself healthy and happy, and to the best extent as you can. As I said, I'm not be positive all the time and be happy all the time, but you really want to do and invest your time in what fills you up, especially if you have a feminine essence. You want your cup to be filled up so that it can spill over onto others. Otherwise, it gets very draining and you don't give anything of quality to anyone, really. So self-care is not selfish. It is a very good investment for you, being able to show up for yourself and others. So something that is very powerful as a tool is also to write a letter to your inner child, stating your commitment to caring for him or her. And this can be very powerful, to really write in your own way a declaration to yourself that you choose yourself first and foremost, and what you are going to do to show up for yourself. This can be short, long, but really is a statement that I am now here for myself first and foremost. And this inner child work that you hear a lot about, if you're in the self-development field in any way, shape, or form, I think you've heard it. It is because those parts of ourselves, those wounds created in childhood, are such a big part, I dare say, about the self-sabotage that we have. And it's when we go there, really work with those parts, and that's also part of shadow work, right? To really claim ownership again of this kind of disowned parts of us, we can actually come into whole and into center in another way. And we can, from there, show up for ourselves, but also for others in a totally different and much more empowered way. So declaring this to yourself can be a great step. And also, when feeling emotionally triggered, put a hand on your heart and ask the little one of you. So I do this a lot myself, and say to clients, when we go about the day, when you start to feel like you're scattered or triggered or afraid or just anxious or, pissed off or whatever, just, you know, take a couple of deep breaths. Of course, breath in itself, remember to just breathe, to come into this present moment, is something that can really help us to just create that pause that we need to be able to respond to something, reflect before we just reactively say yes or no or go into something. So put a hand on your heart, maybe on your stomach as well. Usually for me, it's just a heart. And ask yourself, what do I need right now? And ask your inner child, if you're feeling especially angry, scared, anxious, am I letting you down in some way? Yeah. What do I really need right now? Or what do you need from me right now? To that little one of you inside of you that feels triggered. Or maybe just saying, it's okay. It's okay to feel this. And breathe. I am safe to feel. To really remember to take these pauses throughout the days when you feel that something is coming up for you or you're just feeling scattered or tired. And I am worthy. It's another good one. Or I am here for myself. So learning, this is part of kind of soothing ourselves in the nervous system and start to kind of rewire ourselves to be more consciously here and choose from the inside and out and start living from the inside and out again. So conscious awareness is a great step. So we can observe ourselves and move towards responding instead of just reacting. But ultimately, for evolution to happen, we must integrate through the emotional body, right? We must experience the uncomfortable emotions that arises when we choose ourselves first. Because if we have codependent patterns, we will feel highly uncomfortable when we choose ourselves first. So we learn how to hold our own hand as we walk through this and eventually experience another emotional reality. Things get easier and we will have more freedom and balance. So that will come, I promise, if you're on this path. There was something I was going to say, but it slipped my mind. So moving on here, if you have a lot of Libra influence, the Aries polarity that can be helpful for you to kind of, you know, move towards as a reference point or as a inspiration maybe, is raw, authentic expression, right? Not so goddamn accommodating. Just say it like it is. You know, just imagine, right? Just blurt something out. Express and act without too much forethought. Ooh, just say it, yeah? Because Libra is just so good at being considerate or presentable. Again, we can't just pick one thing out of the chart and that's, you know, the whole story. It's always complex and all going on at the same time, but just keeping it simple here. So I'd say if you have a lot of Libra, to practice these kind of Aries traits that just be more raw, authentic, and not so accommodating, and think that if you make a mess with someone, you can clean it up. So it's not the end of the world if you happen to say something that wasn't the best thing to say. Because, you know, if you're emotionally aware, you can just always go back and say, I see that what I said upset you, or did it hurt you? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, what I really meant was this. Or, you know, you can, it wasn't my intention. But now that I see that it affected you this way, I would like to, you know, see how we can work through this together, whatever. Like, so you can always clean it up. I'm not saying go out there and just become, you know, narcissistically just self-centered, but, you know, you want to balance yourself with this. So if you make a mess, just clean it up. I have a special destiny and I came here to live out my life and my own story. Some healthy self-centeredness, right? Like ultimately it's true. Like we are here for your own evolution. You can't be too focused on everybody else all the time, right? That is like you fail God. If you come here and you weren't you were just, you know, pleasing everybody else, you failed your mission. So just connecting to that, I'm special person, I'm a special child of God, and I have a destiny to live out. So I better get about that, you know, doing that, and not focusing so much on what everybody else wants from me. Practice to take the lead, to go at it alone if necessary. me first. It's a good one. And if there's a lot of Scorpio, the Taurus polarity is self-worth, right? And I've heard this somewhere and it just stuck with me, and I find it to be so true. If we're going to navigate the deep waters of Scorpio, where we do want to experience deep intimacy and, you know, hopefully deep sexual merging with someone and union, to navigate those deep waters, we need self-worth. If we have self-worth, we have the capacity to say yes or no, or to choose ourselves first, even though we have so much invested in that relationship. Because if it's not worthy for us, what's going on, it's just a no. So self-worth is just awesome, right? And of course, it's just you can consciously move towards it. It doesn't happen over a day. If you don't have it, it's not just like I'm going to decide that I have it and then there it is. Of course, we can make a conscious decision, but it's about practicing this inner child work and all these self-care practices that will create self-worth. And an utter self-sustainability, emotionally, financially, and economically. That was a slip there. I suppose I wanted to say emotionally, financially, and energetically self-sustainable. I can rely upon myself, so I can withdraw from a union if it's necessary. I don't have to get stuck there for the rest of my life. I source my sense of self from within myself. I know my values. Right? Taurus, good Taurus stuff. I am all that I need, and I am better off alone than in bad company. This is the self-worth part, even if the attraction is super strong, right? So, okay, oh God, if the attraction is so strong, I just, yeah, but if it's toxic, it's not good for you. And if we have self-worth, we know how to say no to that, more easily at least, right? Slowing down and simplifying life, which is a good thing to do. And last but not least, wrapping up here, the healed healer. I also just want to say, when I use the word heal, sometimes I have a little bit of aversion towards it myself. Not aversion, but it's like, are we ever healed? You know, it's always, everything is a process, everything is a journey. And I don't think maybe we ever get to the point necessarily where like, okay, I'm totally healed with this wound or that pattern. But yet, that being said, I put here the healed healer. So I find that when we dare to look at our own patterns of codependency, also as counselors, therapists, guides, or healers, we can move towards becoming the healed healer. We can at least move towards it, right? To know when, how much, and to whom to give our time and attention, and not to go about saving people because we feel our worth is invested, or that's where our worth comes from, how many people I can try to save. And become even stronger conduits for spirit, I'd say, to really move through us, and knowing that we can't really save anyone, but we can be companions and help others to transform. We can be there, create containers for transformation and healing for others. And that's very powerful and much needed work in this day and age, right? So from Venus to Neptune. So finding yourself and your needs, Venus, and learning about earthly love and what I need as a human in relationships is necessary, I feel, before we can honestly move towards true selfless service and divine love, Neptune. We can't skip having a self and knowing how to care for it with healthy boundaries and just bypass into selflessness. Then it's not a sustainable journey. So I feel it's very valid, right, to go through Venus to Neptune in that sense. And just to wrap this up, something that I'm deeply passionate about and that my work is a lot about in this day and age, as we are moving out of the patriarchy, I think we can all agree, whether we want to call it a patriarchy or not, that the world that we have been in is no longer, and we're moving and we're changing in age, and we're moving into a new one call it the age of Aquarius or something else, doesn't really matter. We're smack in the middle of it, right? And all these planets in Capricorn culminating in on their own south nodes, and it's just you if you're into astrology, you know. And if not, we're turning an age. So what I see in this transition piece that we are in now, we're leaving the old. It's kind of like we already left. Elvis has left the building, but we haven't really created the new yet. A keyword that I really resonate with for this new age, call it the age of Aquarius or whatever you want, is unity and diversity. We're not going back to a matriarchy. We're no longer in the patriarchy. We're going to create unity. So we have the divine masculine and divine feminine. And since the divine feminine has been severely repressed, and the divine masculine very distorted as well, but the divine feminine is rising. So for this new paradigm to be ushered in, I also see it is very important that women, and of course this is my personal calling, right, but the women and feminine leaders know how to release codependency patterns, to dare to speak truth to power and to be visible. Because what I see on my own personal journey, took me a while, and people I work with, that this is vital. There are so many women sitting on so much knowledge and service and divine gifts that they want to share with the world, but they can't really get there, you know. And I really am passionate about supporting that to happen for others. And this whole codependency piece seems to be one of the big wounds within the feminine. It's an archetype that keeps us playing small, holding back, and not speaking our truth, because we're so afraid of the reactions that might come from others. And looking at history and what women as a collective have been through, of course, it's not strange if we have, you know, collective wounds of not wanting to speak our truth or being afraid of doing so. So anyways, I'm very passionate about talking about this because it's such a huge shift that can happen, particularly for women. Of course, this is generalized. This can be alive in men as well. And of course, within men or women, we have both masculine and feminine. So it's not like we can just separate them two. But especially for this new era to be ushered in, I can't wait for more women or for more feminine essence to really rise and to speak truth and to share their divine gifts. And I feel like that will be a huge part of ushering in the new paradigm that we need. So releasing codependency, so to not be blamed and shamed into staying small, but rather know how to hold one's own value from within oneself and do what we came here to do. So that was it for me. You can find me. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I do have one question for you from our audience. It's in the chat.
Okay. Should I start the share here to just see the chat, right?
No, you've got your last slide, haven't you?
Yeah.
With contact details?
This is the last slide.
Okay. So the question is in the chat.
Mm-hmm. I can't really, let me see. Stop share. Okay, do you see Pluto in Libra or very Libran charts as an example of those of us who are working with personal, other, or collective existential non-original guilt? Because Libra naturally follows Virgo. Yeah, I mean, of course, it's one of those, like, it generalized too much, but I definitely see with Libra a lot of guilt coming up that is non-natural in the sense of it's conditioned guilt, right? It's not something that we know. I find it's a key thing also within evolutionary astrology and Jeffrey Wolf Green's work, as to my understanding at least, that this is a big distinction between natural guilt. We just know when we've done something that wasn't right or good in a sense. or conditioned guilt. And I'd say with Libra, what comes up as conditioned guilt is a lot related to this topic of I'm not pleasing others. I'm not presentable, I'm not being good, and others are not liking me. That can really raise feelings of guilt that are not natural but conditioned. But as it evolves from Virgo, of course, as everything is in unfoldment, that would make sense in that put it that way as well. Haven't really thought about it that way, I think. But now that I read the question, I would say so. And that particularly the guilt, as to my understanding, arises about in relationship when it comes to Libra, to not pleasing, to not being presentable to others, and of course there's how much to give. And yeah, the guilt around giving can be severe. And so yeah, I hope that answers the question. If not, please let me know.
Yes, I think so. That really was a good answer. So Linda, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful presentation filled with lots of great, helpful advice. And would you like to tell us your contact details?
Yes, exactly. That was what I was doing. You can either find me on Instagram at Venus Rising Alchemy, or just contact me personally through my Facebook, which is Linda Jacobsen, or through email, which is venusrisingastro.com or at gmail.com. I don't have a web page up at this moment. I'm working on it.
Okay, so we'll put details down under this video for those who'd like to contact you. And so thank you very much. And we're actually looking forward to having you back very soon. Thank you.
Hopefully so. Thank you. Have a beautiful evening, or whatever time it is. Blessings to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.